All right, everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Founders Cut. I'm here with Taran, founder and co-founder and CEO of Tavolo. I've gotten to know Taran for about, I don't know, 4 or 5 years now, maybe more. We met pre-pandemic when he just got started. That was a long, long time ago, it feels like now. There's been one big pivot along the way, and when we got to talk recently, I thought it'd be a fun story to share with others, early stage founders, first time founders, whatever you want to call it, people that are trying to build a tech company. Thought there was a lot of good information that he could share. So before we jump into what the product is and what the company does, I'd love to kind of hear your early beginnings, how you got to where you are today.
Yeah. I'm originally from Queens, New York, was born and spent about the first decade of my life there. My dad was a taxi driver in New York, but he was very entrepreneurial at the same time. He was running a lot of small convenience stores concurrently with helping drive taxi. And eventually him and my uncles pulled some money together and they were like, hey, we want to get into real estate and hospitality, and started looking around the US where there was opportunity. And of all places, they decided to push forward with purchasing property and hotels in Fargo, North Dakota. So our whole family ended up moving from New York to Fargo. Spent like my middle and high school years there. And kind of growing up in Fargo, I started working alongside my dad and my uncles when I was about 12 years old. So I was doing a lot of dirty work, mopping floors, cleaning dishes, helping guests, helping customers, was kind of my job at the family businesses. And then decided to come to college at the University of Minnesota, Carlson School of Management, where I did my double major in entrepreneurial management and marketing. And then I also did a minor in computer science alongside my majors. Graduated in 2021, and I've been in Minneapolis ever since then.
Yeah, huge shout out to Queens. When I was little, we lived in Forest Hills, so I spent 4 years at PS 220. So,
Yeah.
very it's funny to hear someone else have a New York time and then move to the Midwest. It's interesting why people decide to move from the East Coast to the middle of the country, but it's always fun to hear it. When you were in school, you were working on this idea, right?
Mhm.
What made you decide to start the company you did alongside your co-founders?
Yeah, so kind of growing up in hospitality, you got to see a lot of kind of the problems that local operators faced on a pretty regular basis. And I really wanted to build something that could help support, entrepreneurial people like my parents, who face a lot of the same problems that every other entrepreneur is going to face, right? The first iteration of our product was a contactless dining platform, which we started building in 2019. This was pre-COVID. This was at a time where contactless dining was kind of this novel idea that people weren't really adopting super heavily yet. But fast forward a year, COVID hits in March 2020. First we're like, oh crap, what are restaurants going to do? And then we ended up seeing a lot of opportunity there in that space, mostly because operators became really reliant on technologies like ours to help get customers to continue to keep ordering at their restaurant. So that contactless dining platform ended up scaling to about 300 locations. And that was kind of the first iteration of our product and the first kind of use cases we ever got from operators there. And then kind of slowly as time went on, we noticed that a lot of other people were kind of getting into the space. And it became not a super novel kind of concept anymore for like contactless dining platform. So we ended up going back to the drawing board, talked to our customers, saw like why they were signing up for our platform. And after doing a lot of kind of customer discovery, we realized that operators signing up for Tavolo because they were trying to basically sign up for every platform that they could because it was just an additional revenue driver for them. And they would ask us if we could run like specific kinds of campaigns through our app. So like, hey, it's a weekend. I want to do like a weekend deal for, all of our customers that come dine, at our restaurant. And we realized that they were using our platform as a marketing platform more so than for any type of contactless ordering. So that's when we kind of, started to think about, okay, what can we do that solves a bigger problem for operators that's not being solved in the market right now? And that's when we kind of came up with our current iteration of Tavolo, which is an AI-driven content creation and automated marketing platform for restaurants that helps drive revenue. And our number one goal was how do we get more business for these local operators? And since then, we've kind of been off to the races, and it's cool kind of being at the forefront of like this new uh, age of AI and kind of the capability that's going to have over the next, 10, 15, 20 years and see how it shapes different industries and see what kinds of cool products are kind of built on there. But yeah, that's kind of our journey since we started.
So help me help me piece together the conversation you had in your meeting room with your co-founders and other members of your team when it came to the conversation of AI, machine learning, automation for the company, right? Because and maybe and maybe you already were thinking about integrating this into the platform, but I think I'm asking this because there's probably a lot of founders out there that are in the fork in the road where they didn't have machine learning AI integrated into their solution pre, the chat GPT craze, all this AI stuff that's coming on line by all the major players, Microsoft, Amazon, Salesforce, they all got some version of AI that they're
Mhm.
helping their customers integrate with. What made you decide that you had to take the jump, take the leap into the space?
So I think for us was the biggest thing was this. So we actually started selling a software that wasn't built just to see if people would buy it. So we were going to the operators and being like, hey, if we could do the content creation and marketing for you and automate it for you as a business operator, how much would you pay for it? And, would you be willing to pay for it in the first place? Like how much of a problem does it solve for you? So the earliest people that we ever signed up were just people where we were kind of manually doing a lot of stuff. So we would manually go into chat gpt and have them write an email and see it, have it write a text, and then we would kind of go and sift through like, okay, this is where we should make changes, this is where we should make improvements, and then we'd send it over to the operator and be like, hey, this is like your weekly newsletter that we made for you, right? Or like, hey, we think that we can sell this menu item at a higher, capacity than you're currently doing. And then once we kind of had more use cases of like, hey, people are paying us to do this, and we could actually full-fledged go forward and build a software that solves a problem for them, then we were at a stage where we were like, okay, this is an actual problem that's being solved. It's not something that we made up, and we can scale this for operators across the country. So that's when we ended up actually going forward and like, hey, let's get our MVP built, start building it out. So basically what the platform is doing is it's collecting data from a restaurant's tech stack. So if you're an operator, things like point of sale, third party ordering from like a DoorDash, Grubhub, Uber Eats, online ordering from like a restaurant's website, inventory data, pulling all that information together to understand your customers and understand your business. And then alongside that, we're tracking kind of these macro trends across the restaurant industry to see like what kinds of content's performing well, what's kind of like the macro trends that are happening across, industry wide, that we can kind of use as a resource to understand what kinds of content that we should create for you as an operator. And we eventually, kind of thought to ourselves, like, if we could build a platform that operated as a marketing agency, but it was a software for you that did it, we'd be kind of we'd have a lot of opportunity there. So that's kind of like the early process of like, okay, we're thinking about pivoting, what are the kind of signs that indicate that you should be pivoting? I think the number one thing is what are your customers, what do they want, what do they need? You don't want to pivot just for the sake of pivoting, just because AI is like this cool trend that's happening across the industry. I think there needs to be very specific use cases for it that actually solve problems for people. So yeah, so we were very kind of scrappy early on and saw who would pay for it, saw if the problem was real. And then once we knew that we were concretely solving a problem, that's when we kind of went ahead and we're like, okay, I think this is where, the business should be getting steered towards.
And give me a little bit of better context in terms of timeline. When did you form the company? When did you decide that you wanted to explore a pivot? And when did that pivot occur?
Yeah. So I would say ideation actually started towards the summer after my freshman year of college. So that was around 2018. Uh, Full-fledged actually going forward with building our business was in 2019, towards the end of my sophomore year of college. Um, we were building, building, building. COVID hit during the second semester of my junior year of college. And then, COVID hit, we were trying to scale, and we were really kind of building out this contact ordering platform. And then eventually, I would say 2022, end of 2022 is when we really started to have discussions about, okay, there's a lot of competitors in the market. what do we do, right, with the data that we're seeing across the board with our current customers and operators, right? Like we want to be at a point where we wanted to build a product that was very difficult to imitate. Right. So we wanted to build something where if a competitor did come in, our customers would have a hard time kind of going to another operator or going to another software. So we thought to ourselves, how can we build a platform where our platform is continuously getting smarter the more data it understands about you, and the content keeps getting better over time as well, because it's continuously getting more information about your restaurant and what's happening across the industry. And we kind of have that proprietary technology in-house in Tavolo, where just cannot be imitated, even if you want to build your own content creation AI driven platform for operators. And then we kind of looked kind of across the industry to see like what the opportunity really was. So, how many operators are there in the US? What kinds of problems are we actually solving for these operators? And then eventually we convinced 10 guinea pigs from our original platform to kind of give us a shot. And that was just through, I think when you do good work, people notice and they're willing to give you chances when, usually people won't. So people gave us a shot and we were able to luckily enough, provide, unique use cases for people since then. So yeah.
So let's do a little role playing in the sense that I am a restaurateur. I've got a small small business. I don't know if it's one spot or many.
Mhm.
What's the opportunity that I'm missing out on by not using a solution like yours?
Yeah. So the first thing I look into is what you're already doing for marketing. And then we start looking more into the types of revenue that we can drive for you as an operator. So we guarantee every operator is going to see a minimum 3x return on investment after joining the platform. And that's guaranteed kind of across the board, depending on however many locations you have. So we will look into what you're existing doing, if you're using agency or if you're doing it all yourself. Really where Tavo is able to really come in as well, since we're collecting all this data across your business. We can see if our platform is actually is directly impacting your revenue, and if you're getting an ROI on your investment in Tableau, or if you're not. So if you're leveraging anything else like a marketing agency, you might be able to get some content and stuff made, but actually understanding ROI is very difficult to do because these people don't have access to the data that we have. Secondly, we look at how much content can impact operators who aren't doing it at all. So if you're not doing anything across the board when it comes to email campaigns, text campaigns, social campaigns, you're missing out on hundreds of $1,000s a year in terms of revenue, and also brand building over time. From my experience as someone who grew up in the hospitality space, the number one thing that we relied on was repeat customers. So how can we get people to continuously return to our restaurant or our hotel? Because they ended up accounting for about 80% of our yearly revenue in general. So if you don't have a lot of repeat customers, there's a very low likelihood that your business is going to be able to sustain itself for a long period of time. So really what we're able to do is come in and help you increase the amount of repeat customers. So the average Tavolo customer sees an over 50% increase in repeat monthly customers. Even a 5% increase can raise profitability up to 95% for operators. So, you're missing out on potentially saving your business oftentimes if you're not leveraging any type of content, any type of strategies for repeat ordering. And that's where kind of our platform comes in, and we're able to solve that problem for you as an individual operator, or if you have multiple units as well. So I think really the way I look at it is, hey, oftentimes you don't have enough money to afford an agency, mostly because they're super expensive. And if you can't afford an agency, you as an operator are responsible for doing everything yourself. Or you have to hire somebody to do it for you, which oftentimes can be super costly as well. Really, where Tav was able to come in is we're a software that's able to kind of handle a lot of this manual labor that used to be required by human beings to take care of. And I think with the advent of AI and kind of the innovations that have happened over the last 2 to 3 years, it'll continuously get better, and we're going to be at a point where a lot of kind of the manual labor that human beings used to do isn't actually required anymore, because we have platforms and softwares out there that are able to handle a lot of those problems. So yeah, that's kind of the way I go about talking with operators, getting them to understand, the benefit of using Tavolo, and the kinds of impacts we can have on you as a business owner.
How do you cut through the noise that is in that industry, right? So being where I sit on the VC side, not necessarily do I see companies that are doing exactly what you're doing, but there's a lot of companies doing something in your space, right? And so as an operator that's trying to run a business, I think the the fatal flaw is that you get lumped into everybody else, right?
Mhm.
Regardless of whether or not it's justified. So what has been your secret to getting to such a decent, fast start in the space, right? Like it's not easy to sell into these places,
Yeah.
yet you're having some early success. So I
Yeah.
guess kind of curious, like, why do you think you're standing out compared to others?
Yeah. So you mean more so in like the AI space or think, oh
Just
yeah.
in general, like just trying to sell any type of SaaS solution to a
Mhm.
restaurateur, they're probably
Yeah.
getting hit up in their inbox or unsolicited or someone walking to the door probably a handful of times a week, right? For this or
Yeah.
that. And whether
Yeah.
it's another AI solution or just some other type of offering, like
Yeah.
eventually they just tune it all out, right? Say, I don't have
Yeah.
time for this. I'm just going to run a business, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I think I think there's a couple things that have helped us increase the amount of operators that know about us relatively quickly. Number one, for operators, especially growing up in the space, the number one thing that my parents and I cared about was if something was actually going to generate revenue for us. And I think it's very hard to find platforms that can prove their value for you long term. And that's part of the reason why, you have to kind of cut through the noise and go down to like, okay, what are the actual needs of these what are the actual needs of my customers, right? And how do I get in front of them in the first place? I think the second thing is that our team, right? We kind of practice what we preach, right? We're really big on how we can use content to help improve an individual restaurant's business. But our platform also does a ton of content creation for itself. So if you ever go on the Tavolo Instagram or TikTok page, you will see videos with millions of views. From us just kind of knowing how content works and how we can get it to perform well for individual operators. And kind of going through that process, a lot of inbound leads actually come in from restaurant operators. They're like, "Hey, I'm interested in seeing what you're doing. I see that you're doing something in marketing with restaurants. I want to learn more. I want to understand how your software works." And we've been able to get a significant amount of customers kind of going through that kind of organic content creation process. So we're really big on showcasing that value for operators and showcasing like, hey, we're not just selling you a software that can potentially get you an ROI. You can look at what our team does already, and you'll see that content is at the forefront of our business as a whole, and that makes us even more confident that we're going to be able to help you as an operator as well. So, I think number one, focusing on the problems that they're facing, and two, showcasing the value without necessarily trying to pitch it to them, and that's where I think content can be huge for businesses like ours. Like I said, there's a million and one AI companies in the world. Really, I think if you actually solve a problem for somebody, your customers will notice. And if you're, just going on like the fad wave, right? If you're not solving an actual problem for anyone, then it's really hard to kind of cut through the noise. So for any business owner, I think that's the number one thing you should be aware of is like, or solving problem for your customers, and kind of goes back to my initial point of when we were building our MVP, right? We actually were manually doing some of the services that we wanted our software to be able to do because we wanted to see if people would pay for it in the first place, right? We don't want to build something and then, we get it out in the market and then nobody wants to use it. And I think that's how we were 100% sure that we were solving a problem for someone. And once we were confident on that, then we're like, okay, now let's see how we can leverage technology to improve this for individual owners. Yeah, I would say those are kind of the main things, right? Solve a problem for somebody and then showcase the value without pitching to them directly.
Got it. No, that makes sense. Let's go back to the customer's perspective. Let's say someone wants to use your services. What's the onboarding look like? Do they need to input a bunch of their financial data, their business stats, their menu? Like, how does it work for you to have enough information to get the engine started?
Yeah. So the minimum thing we need is a cloud-based point of sale system. So if you have a Toast, Clover, Square, etc., that's the kind of the basic requirements for our platform to really work well for you. There are other operators that have a little bit more complicated tech stacks, depending on if they're using like an inventory software, or if they're using any type of tablet ordering from like a DoorDash, Grubhub, Uber Eats, if they don't have that directly integrated. But for the most part, if you have a cloud-based PO system, we're able to get you set up relatively quickly. Usually what we say is onboarding will take, under 30 minutes once we have everything kind of set up. And once that data starts pulling in, we're able to start creating the content right away. So usually, if you add in that, it probably takes about an hour total. And yeah, so then it'll create content for you. Usually we'll set a cadence, right? Whether you want it to be every Monday, Tuesday, a new batch of content auto-generated for you. You can kind of go in and manually create it yourself too if you wanted to auto-generate and regenerate. And then set up some of the cadences for when you want it to post, and kind of go out to your customers as well. So then it kind of becomes up to the operator on how they want to leverage it. But usually we say about 30 minutes to an hour is usually what we take for onboarding.
And then once it's up and running, how much time is that restaurateur going to be spending weekly to push the content? Does how much time are you saving them? I guess in the grand scheme of things, if they're already someone that's doing this manually, right?
Yeah. So, we often say we'll save you hundreds of hours every single year by not having to manually do it yourself. So it depends on the kind of operator that you are. Some people are really set it and forget it kind of people, right? Especially I've noticed with individual owners, right? They want something that's like, hey, I have so much on my plate and I just want this platform to take care of this entire marketing side of my business for me. I like what it's creating. I don't need to be super hands-on with it. So they will auto schedule everything to go out. The AI will create your content for you and it'll be sending it on a weekly basis. And there's a lot of operators like that. There's others that are a little bit more hands-on where they're like, hey, I just want to see what it's creating every single week, create any slight modifications if I do
Mm.
want to, change XYZ, and then just have it set out on a certain cadence. Other people are a lot more hands-on where, they want very specific campaigns created, and then we have an option for you to do that as well. So you can just tell the platform like, hey, I specifically want a campaign created for my, Oreo milkshake, and I want to do a bundle deal with the Oreo milkshake with my skillet fries or something like that, right? And then it'll create that content for you and have that ready and prepared for you to send out to your customers.
Got it.
So a few different use cases depending on what kind of owner you are, what kinds of content you want to create. But yeah, so I would say that's kind of the cadence. Usually, every operator is checking it at least a few times a week to see what kinds of materials it's creating for you.
And then does your platform actually show them the performance of the campaigns that are getting pushed out? Like this one got more clicks, this one got more conversion, that kind of things, or is
Yep.
that based on just like looking at their own sales at their point of sales?
Yeah, so it's tracking everything is tracking the amount of people. Let's say you push a promo code, right? We're looking at exactly how many people have actually opened the email that has a promo code in it, what percentage are clicking on it, how many people have actually used your promo code, how much revenue has that generated? Is it a lift in your revenue or not? Has it impacted profitability at
Sure.
all? So we're able to get pretty granular with the impact that it's having on you as an operator, for us to actually understand like, hey, is this a campaign that worked well, or was it a campaign that did not work well for us? And if it didn't work well for us, how can we iterate and make it more powerful over time and see what kinds of campaigns are going to have more powerful returns for us for us as owners. So we really focus on how do we showcase the value of you being a Tavolo customer, because we know that it's a data driven business right now where if you can show you the data points that showcase the value, then you're going to understand, right, why you're
Yeah.
leveraging our service. So we're really kind of harp on that within the platform.
All right. One more hypothetical question, and then we'll get close to wrapping up. But I have this conversation internally, but also with founders all the time. And so I'd love to get your thoughts on it. And obviously, you'll never know because you can't go back in time. Not yet, anyway. Who knows? But there's a world where you came up with this current version of Tavolo without having to go through the first 3 or 4 years of building version 1.0, right? So let's call this 2.0. Do you think you'd be where you are today if you didn't go through those 3 or 4 years of learning in version 1.0? Because like there's a world when I was doing my startup where if I could have gotten to a point where I felt like, oh yeah, this is what I wanted to do 4 years ago, I don't know why I didn't do it sooner, right? Versus like all the lessons I learned and all the mistakes I made and whatnot.
Mhm.
And I firmly don't know if I would have been able to be successful had I not, had that chance to make those mistakes in the beginning. So curious to see like what your thoughts are on that front, because I think far too often founders want to just go too fast, and they don't really understand like the benefits of those early years where it's really messy and
Yeah.
mistake filled. So I'm wondering like what lessons did you carry over from the before the pivot?
Yeah, I think, yeah, I mean that's a really good question. I think that I don't know if I would want to get rid of those years. I think that they were really kind of impactful in one, right? It's understanding how to actually build a business, right? You even if I think I had our current concept fully fleshed out by the time I was 19. I don't know if I had the acumen to fully, I guess, execute on it, right? At the same capacity I think that we do now because we've spent significantly more time in the industry. And we've also spent significantly more time talking to operators and just kind of, my co-founders and I have just grown as entrepreneurs, period, right? There's certain things you just learn that you just don't know how to do at the early years of like your first company, right? And I think that I wouldn't necessarily trade those just to have a faster timeline. Part of it's also that timing is pretty important for startups, right? And I think that if we would have had our initial concept even like 4 years ago, I'm not sure if it would have been the right timing for AI content creation to kind of be deployed across operators. So that's another kind of like element of it, right? Of like we're in a time right now where I think we can really scale, right? And people see the value of it. I'm not sure if in 2019 it would have been the same way,
Yeah,
but I mean, who knows? I think that I think if you get too in the hypotheticals, right? There's always a reason why you should do something or shouldn't do something, but you're just never gonna know the outcome of it. So I think that I'm very grateful for the learnings that we had along the way. Don't get me wrong, there was a lot of grind that you had to go through, and there's moments even in those years where you're like, I don't know how we're going to figure things out. I don't know how this is going to work. And I think if you have kind of the hustle, right? You have kind of that, I don't even know how to explain it, like the X factor of you know entrepreneurship, right? Like I think a lot of great founders figure it out. A lot of founders that I know that are really successful now have pivoted their businesses and now they're running, right, businesses worth upwards of hundreds of millions of dollars, right? And their early days, it was almost like they spent 2 3 years building one thing, had a pivot, and then they built a massive business over the next 2 to 3 years, right? But those early years are significantly always gonna be critical for your kind of journey and understanding like even how to build a great business. So yeah, I mean, I'm on the same boat as you, Adam, right? I think that I wouldn't trade those years for anything.
yeah, I think it's a really important point, right? And especially the timing part, because I've always said that you look at any good idea that succeeded or is in the process of succeeding today, someone probably came up with it 10 years ago, and someone
Mhm.
probably came up with it 10 years before that, but they
Yeah.
were at the wrong period of time to execute
Yeah.
on it. Like my example is Yonder. When we did our pediatric healthcare company, our whole premise was leveraging kids entertainment and mixed reality and what today people are calling the metaverse, right? Now you
Yeah.
look everywhere, every corporation is doing their employee training in the metaverse or this and that in the metaverse, right? But 4 years ago, when I was talking to investors locally, everyone would just roll their eyes and be like, what are you talking about? Like, who cares
Yeah.
about mixed reality, AR, VR? And so, to your point, like, if I would still be doing it today, now is probably the right time to actually start a company like that, right? So
Yeah.
I think you're right. Like timing plays a huge part. So if you're a founder out there listening, you have to have a good idea, but you also need to know when to time the market, right? And so you can't come up with something too crazy if you're going to be the one that has to do all of the educating, especially if you don't have deep pockets, because educating people about a new technology or a new way of doing business or a new anything takes a lot of time and money. And less concerned about the money, I'm more concerned about the amount of time. Like
Yeah.
if you were trying to do all that education on machine learning and AI to sell
Mhm.
your product as opposed to just saying like, "Oh, have you tried ChatGPT?" It's so much
Yeah.
easier because
Yeah.
ChatGPT spent all that time and money educating people
Yeah.
on the brilliance of it. So yeah, I think you're right. I agree on the front of like, timing plays a huge part. And you never know, like there's nuances of things that I probably learned a lot from making mistakes at Yonder that I don't even think about today that are playing a huge part in the way I conduct business. And probably the same for you as, back in 2018, 2019, 2020, making those mistakes then has probably saved you plenty of time and plenty of money in this version 2.0. Let's pivot a little bit. What are you excited about moving into 2024?
Business wise or just
Business wise, whatever. Yeah, this is just about as much about the person as it is the business. So whatever comes
yeah.
to mind.
Yeah, I think one, so we just wrapped up at Techstars I want to say 3 weeks ago. So we're looking at closing on our first round of capital. So we're going to be kind of full-fledged heading into 2024, focused on scaling, building out a little bit of a larger team, really trying to onboard more customers and grow significantly over the year of 2024. I'm really excited about that, seeing like the growth opportunity, for Tavolo as a business. Um, in general for 2024, I'm excited to see kind of how our platform also progresses and improves over time. So, in addition to scaling, right, we're going to be continuously iterating and seeing how we can make the product itself more powerful for our customers, and try to provide more value over time with that as well. So, I would say though, from a business perspective, those are kind of our two most exciting things, right? I think once we're able to fully get everything finalized and secured, then we're gonna be kind of full steam ahead, trying to execute, trying to grow. I keep telling my teammates, I'm like, we're about to strap into the rocket ship right now, so let's just focus on execution, as we wrap up the year and as we head into the next year. So that's very exciting, but I think life wise, I think we're in a very exciting stage of the business where I'm not sure that we've ever had this much momentum behind us before, and I'm really excited to kind of carry that forward. I know, Adam and I have talked about this in the past, but yeah, founders have like a tank, right, where you don't know where you are in the tank level, and oftentimes after trying to yeah, after going through like a lot of hard stuff for a few years, the tank level gets really low and it's hard for you to fuel up again. But right now, my co-founders and I, we're like, at 120% right now. So we're at a stage where we're just very excited to be working together and building something that's
Yeah.
solving the problem. And the horizon looks really, really, really cool to us. So that's what I'm
Yeah.
most excited.
I love it. I ask that question to every founder I talk to, especially ones that are looking for investment is, be honest with me, is the tank half full, quarter full, three quarters
Yeah.
full? Because it's important. And, I think a lot of founders take it the wrong way and think that if it's a quarter full that I'm not interested. It's more along what you just said. Like there's going to be probably four or five, maybe a dozen checkpoints along the journey where your tank is getting to a quarter
Yeah.
full.
Yeah.
And the question isn't whether or not you're going to get to empty. It's can you find something in that business's trajectory that's going to be able to recharge you to give you
Yeah.
enough gas to get to the next milestone, right? And so, look, I remember being in the shoes that you're in where COVID hit. I was like, what am I going to do with my business? I'm bootstrapped. I'm poor. Like, where am I going? And you just kind of keep going. But, things like that deplete it so much faster. So to hear that you're got to a point where you feel like you've topped off and your co-founders have topped off, that's really bullish for anyone that's investing in your opportunity. For people that want to find you, whether it's potential customers, potential people that want to maybe throw their hat in the ring to work for you one day, or just investors or advisors that want to learn more, what's the best way for them to get in contact with you?
Yeah. If you guys want to find our socials are at it's Tavolo everywhere. So Instagram, TikTok, LinkedIn, whatever it is, it's Tavolo everywhere. If you want to shoot me an email, my email is just taranveer@tavoloapp.com. I respond to virtually every email that I ever get. So if anyone ever is interested in chatting and connecting, happy to connect with folks. So yeah, reach out anytime.
Um, any piece of advice for founders that might be listening to this episode now or sometime randomly in the future?
My number one piece of advice, and I mentioned this a little bit earlier, is don't build something until you're confident people are willing to pay for it. And my reasoning behind that is that the amount of entrepreneurs that I know that have built businesses that generate very little revenue because they don't solve a big enough problem is a dime a dozen. And I think it's part of probably one of the number one reasons that businesses just don't work out. It's because you're solving a problem that nobody really has, and you just thought it was something cool you could build. But see if people are willing to, uh, you know, use your software, use your service, but do it manually for a little bit, right? I think there's a lot of learnings you're going to get through doing kind of that scrappy work early on. And I think those learnings are going to indicate whether or not you can build a large business or if you're going to build a smaller business, right? I think that's probably my number one piece of advice, right? Like hustle, don't build until you're confident that people are willing to use your software, use your service, whatever it might be, use your product, um, and make that like your MVP of MVPs. It's like a pre-MVP basically. And then once you're confident in that, then you can start going full fledged and start building something cool that solves a bigger problem for people. And I say that from like firsthand experience, right? Like I've built the product without doing much research and had a hard time selling it to people. But then I've also built a product where I did a ton of scrappy stuff manually and then I built it and then people used it. So I'm saying that from very firsthand experience, firsthand advice. So but that would be my number one thing, right? Don't be afraid to hustle, do it manually, like get a lot of learnings early on. And then once you're ready, then start putting the money and the dollars towards building what you want to build and make it as sick as possible long term. So yeah, that'd be my number one piece of advice.
Yeah, I think that's um, one of the skills or the arts of the founders that can do it well that sets them apart from the ones that don't, which is how do I still prove the concept without spending hundreds of thousands of dollars
Yeah.
to build out the MVP? The MVP should never be something that costs six figures unless you're in a different like industry like med device
Yeah.
or pharma, I guess. But outside of that, if you're in a software world or in a you know less deep tech type of environment, there is always a way to piece something together to prove out aspects of what you're trying to build, to build out your thesis before you go full fledged on it. I think one of the biggest mistakes that any founder can make is not asking enough questions because questions are free outside of your time, right? So, too many times founders will just get started really, really quick, deploying capital in a way that they probably shouldn't because it's probably not where they need to go with it. I couldn't agree more. The first $30,000 we spent on Yonder, we probably didn't need to spend it. We could have spent it 10 other ways that were much more beneficial.
Yeah.
But like you said, you learn those lessons the hard way. I'd rather learn it at 30,000 than at like 300,000 or $3 million, right? So
Yeah.
take take that advice to heart. All right, so before I wrap up, give you the stage if you want to shout anyone out, have any last things you want to talk about, highlight a restaurant, whatever you want to do, and then we'll close it out here.
Shout outs. I mean, there's so many people I'd love to shout out. I mean, I want to shout out Abdi and Sal, my co-founders. Both kick-ass guys that I don't think I would want to build this business with anyone else. I want to shout out everyone from Techstars. That's actually how Adam and I actually reconnected. Was he came into the Techstars office. So shout out everyone at Techstars, Sarah Bain, Georgia Paul, Arthur Perrins, Brett Broll, that whole team. They were super instrumental in kind of our growth and trajectory as a business this year and kind of beyond. Adam, I want to shout out you for having me on the podcast and being kind of a mentor as well, kind of through your experience as a founder and now kind of delving more into the venture space. And I want to shout out the Minnesota startup ecosystem for being really supportive and helping founders like myself grow over the years. And then last, I just want to shout out, all of our customers, right? I want to thank you guys for taking a shot with us, like, or giving us a shot to prove our value for you. And I'm excited to, continue to improve our product and provide more value for you and for future customers. Excited to see how Tavolo impacts you in the future as well. So yeah.
I got one more shout out. I'm gonna do it for you. Shout out to your folks for taking that big risk early on and leaving everything behind and coming to the States.
Yeah.
I think without their hard work, you and I aren't in a position where we are with our families, right? So,
Yeah.
huge shout out to the family support to get you to where you are today.
No.
Well, Taryn, it was super fun. I think people are going to enjoy your story. So I really appreciate you coming on. So if you're looking for him, like you said, he's an email away. He answers every email that gets sent. So if you have any more questions, just shoot him a note or find him on social. So thanks again for joining me, and I really appreciate your time.
Awesome. Appreciate it, Adam.